Okay. Dubious advantage of the internet being off for a while, or just not working. Able to get a little binging done. In this case, managed to finish up Star Trek Prodigy. And we are got a case of, the animated side is the only thing, is the only one that is being left alone by Kurtzman and his merry band of morons. And as such, the animated side of these things, Lower Decks and Prodigy, are the only ones that are even, having of lining up with proper Star Trek. Now, Prodigy is, it's actually pretty decent storyline going here. The characters are okay. They're not Mary Sue's. They screw up all the time. And there's some sympathetic, things going on there. And it does, wrap up, plausibly, given the circumstances. And they do tie into thing, although they are taking some liberties with the uniforms and such. But again, uniforms are uniforms. We can probably do a explanation for that, depending on the timeline here. But I'm not. It's like need to plot out just where this happens in relation to Lower Decks, because Lower Decks is still holding standard uniforms we know of, for the most part. For regular Starfleet, they still got the gray shoulders and the colored undershirt, while their division of the Starfleet has their own uniform. But then we, again, I'm not going to do spoilers at this point. You come in where I'm not going to do spoiler warnings. You watch this, you're taking any chances. We do see, well, they get their own type of uniform eventually. I think they finally decide, hey, we're got to be Starfleet, we're going to be Starfleet. And I'm not sure where this uniform comes from. It's like, whatever. But, they do resolve the situation, I think, fairly cleverly, and they take into account just about everything. There's a few things that go weird that they didn't count on, but they still managed to hold to the plan and get everything done. And also take care of the big baddie, and then finally, once around, he's not going to be a problem anymore. There is still a bit of a question of how a Medusan got out there, but again, we don't know much. We've only seen them in one episode, and they were supposed to be the greatest navigators in the galaxy. So, who knows how far they've gotten anywhere? It's easily, because apparently they managed to get a few details as the show went on. Is that this is an area right on where the Delta Quadrant borders the Beta Quadrant. So we're talking the back end of Klingon space. Which kind of explains how they know what Klingons are, too. It's no surprise to them. Yeah, you've seen a few Klingons. They've wandered over that far. Although, but there's also a point where they go all the way to the Gamma Quadrant. Because they kick on that proton drive, or that ProStar drive. But I think that's not a dumb show. It is a smart show. And with the final shot on the bridge of of Admiral Janeway's ship, the Dauntless. And before anyone screams about that was a decoy. No, it's a very simple matter. For they get back, Voyager gets back to Starfleet. They're examining the records and they see this thing of this Dauntless ship that this guy tried to pull a fast one on them. And hey, that's a pretty neat idea actually. Pass it over to the engineers. Make that. You were looking for a new ship to make one of those. And there you go. And no, it's not the same. The secondary hull is different stuff, but same general design. And I think Janeway part herself, like, make this. Include the transwarp drive. I'm going to use that. Especially if the idea was to try and find Chakotay, what happened with his crew on the Protostar. But we shall see. And the thing is, that last scene on the bridge of Janeway's ship, and we see a Tellarite that looks like a Tellarite. So, okay, they haven't totally screwed the pooch as far as Tellarites and Talaxians. We just need to get an explanation now of why we have on this, this ship of, kids a Tellarite that looks like a Talaxian. I want an explanation. Even if it's just a simple thing of when he was growing up, he learned to get through life better looking like a Talaxian, or somebody altered him to look like a Talaxian. He still shows up on Centuries as a Tellarite. That's how the hologram, the Janeway hologram, calls him out as a Tellarite, and he lets it know he's a Tellarite because everyone no one calls him a Talaxian, even by accident. It's like he's been calling himself a Tellarite and been called a Tellarite over and over again. Never mind the fact that it looks like Neelix's chubby cousin. So it kind of tells me, yes, there is an explanation out there, and I want to hear it. Okay, but otherwise, their show is holding pretty good. There's a few technical weirdness there because the transporter room is like straight out of Discovery. It's not a transporter you'd see on Voyager, or as opposed to on Lower Decks when they show a transporter room in there. That's like right off the Next Gen set. It's the same transporter. So in that case, Lower Decks is hewing very closely to the line of consistent look of the technology and the stuff with Next Gen and the movies. That is the same same technology. Prodigy, I don't know. They may have been trying to play a little loose with all things to all people type. You're trying to incorporate little things of the other shows, which I wouldn't advise to, because it's, again, this little schism in the fandom is never going to be even close to being healed until they admit the bloody obvious. Discovery and Picard are alternate timelines. There is no reconciling them. There's no way to fit them in. And Strange New Worlds is following that same damn path. They do not fit with the timeline, and you can't just overwrite the timeline and say this is no, it doesn't work that way. The canon is the canon, and there's a reason why it's the canon. This is the bedrock upon which this franchise is based. You don't alter it. You can add to it. You can explain a few things here and there, but you can't alter it to say that the Enterprise now looks like this. No, it doesn't. And they really show their ignorance when they did their little Captain Pike goes back to Talos 4 episode, and they actually show clips from the cage. Although even that they screwed it because the little flyby of the Enterprise wasn't the pilot Enterprise, it was the production version of the Enterprise. So even then they screwed up. But it's like I said, the look of everything is part of the canon. It's part of established consistent continuity. That in 2250s, this is what the uniforms look like. This is what the ships look like. This is what the hand weapon looks like. This is what the Telosians look like, which they screwed up there. Telosians were not big, tall people. They're played mostly by little old ladies. Seriously, it was the Keeper was played by she was in the Wizard of Oz. Played one of Dorothy's and other there were older actresses than smaller types.
Wasn't one of them also in the Thornbirds?
Yeah, Meg Wiley. But she was a bit on the older side by the time of the cage. And her paycheck, she used to buy a car, because she was still driving when she did Mad About You. But actually, in that one bit that didn't make the two-parter, but it's in the full version of the cage, is when they're looking down the corridor at all the other cells, and they see a Telosian way in the back. That was Felix Silla. Same guy who played Clezzy and just died a couple years, and Tweaky, and he just died a few years ago. But he was a Little People actor. You want to get technical between the difference between dwarf and midget. Felix was a midget. Midget is when they're just smaller, but everything's still regular proportions. Dwarf is like Peter Dinklage, where he got normal head, normal abdomen, but stunted limbs. That's where the difference. But people tend to. One of the reasons they started pushing this little people thing is people kept using the terms wrong. It's like, and also trying to make it. It's a technical medical term. Stop trying to make it an insult. You're not doing anybody any favors. But they just need to admit they're in an alternate timeline, and then in which case they can do whatever the hell they want, and it'll stand and fall on its own merits. Is when they start trying to say that this is how it happened. No, it didn't. We saw how it happened. This ain't it. That's where the fights start. And the added factor is the fact the stories also suck. You're no longer telling Star Trek stories. You're trying to lecture the audience and using Star Trek as a backdrop, and you're not doing it right. The whole point is that humanity had overcome all of its issues, but no, you're making humanity have the same damn issues as today, probably exaggerated a bit for our own ends. And then wondering, well, why do it? Yeah, they dealt with it differently, though. It would be another alien race that would have that issue, and our people would come in and say, no, that's not how you need to get over this bit, strange little aliens. We're beyond this now. We learned a long time ago not to hate people because of this, and this. Still a little preachy, still coming around, but you're no longer insulting everybody in the audience, or denigrating your own backstory too, because it's the whole thing of with the original series, it's like you're now denigrating everything that came before it, because now there's no longer the utopia that Roddenberry was preaching. It's now these people are just as screwed up as we are. So what's the point? And that was the whole thing at the time. It's like, no, it'll be all right. We'll make it past this nuclear Holocaust thing. In fact, part of the thing is like Roddenberry said there was a World War III where there was a full nuclear exchange, and we managed to get past it because we're actually more clever than we think we are. But the way that humanity is depicted in Discovery and Picard is not the way humanity was depicted when they were holding the Roddenberry's edicts, even after he died and Berman took over. Part of the big criticism with Berman is he held a little too tightly to Roddenberry's thing and kind of killed a lot of the drama. And it was, when he was busy focused on Voyager, that's when DS9 got good, because they would get away with a lot of stuff that normally Berman would have shut down. So they managed to get a little more dramatic, a few more fights, and able to push the boundaries a bit more. Because I think that's the big thing. It's like DS9, they wanted to see how far they could push it, and yet it still be Star Trek. Discovery and Picard have no such idea. They don't give a rat's ass about. They just want to change it for the sake of changing it. Patrick Stewart had no interest in the whole thing of dragging him back was that it wouldn't be the same Picard. It's clearly not the same Picard. The Picard we saw in the series would not have gone away into this, but plus also, again, the thing I keep coming back to is that
in the series have more balls.
Well, also, like I said, they based that first season on the whole supposedly the backstory of The Measure of a Man, and yet almost from the get-go it made it clear they'd never watched the episode. They got some character names and a general idea of, supposedly it's about android rights, and yet the fact they totally missed the point. Those android rights were established at the end of that episode, making anything that happened in Picard as pretty much impossible and definitely illegal under Federation law. Because the whole thing about where Guinan comes in, all throughout history there's been categories of disposable people. The ones who do the dirty work. The ones that's too dangerous for everyone else. They're the ones who go in and like dig the mines and stuff. And you don't have to get too attached them because they're all disposable. You can just crank up. In case of androids, just crank up another one and 5 minutes in an industrial replicator, you got a new data. And again, that kind of a big slap. Watching that episode the first time, because you're offended on that part of the data because they're trying to treat them like property, But Guinan would put up that the end goal here is that every ship would have a data, and everyone, they'd be total, just and producing a whole race of disposable android people. And when Picard turns it, you're talking about slavery. It's like, bingo! The course of the thing just changed. You're not talking about just data. Now you're talking about a very big issue. And the thing is, you don't need to accuse anybody of engaging in slavery. That's how you deal with an issue like that. You just bring the possibility of it coming back up under this guise. And I think you could go through all kinds of things about how segregation and racism are being brought back in all their full glory under different terms. Normally, I think Star Trek would be eating this up with a trowel, but they're so busy browbeating all of us into respecting rights of this group and that group and whatever else. And I think, and a large part of it is like, we already settled this long time ago on the original series. From those parts, these things were already settled. Why are you beating us all over again? We already agreed in the first place. I mean, Denise Okuda likes to rant and rave about Plato's stepchildren because of the last line of because Kirk says I got I'm a little surprised here, and she kind of took that wrong. I did at the time, and I don't think Michael Dunn did at the time because he would have screamed high heaven right there on set. I'm a little surprised. I think it's just a turn of phrase because earlier in the episode, when Alexander's asking Kirk, it's like, are there people like me who don't have the power and stuff? And Kirk just kneels down and said, Alexander, where I'm from, size, shape, or color makes no difference. And nobody has the power. But that right there, that's kind of Star Trek in a nutshell. And that should have pretty much been the end of it right there. And then later on the Savage Curtain, when Lincoln notices her, oh, what a charming negress. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, that term. I'm back in my day. That term was used as real property. And where's it? Why should I be offended? In my universe, we've learned not to fear words. Well, that changed quite a bit, didn't it? I still, when I was a kid, the big still thing was sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Now it's words or violence. Where did these namby-pamby, pissant little twits come from? Because this is right now, it's like, forget the Russians invading Ukraine. We got to worry about these morons invading our culture to the point where it's like, we're now afraid of breathing wrong. And I think it's a big part of it. It's like, when I think it was Booker T. Washington, other ones warning about the race hustlers out there. It's like, they'll never let the issue be settled because if they did, they'd be out of work. They made a nice lucrative career about belly aching about the white man keeping us down and everything else, and it's like they'll never let it go. We have had a black president who was elected to 2 terms. We are on our 2nd black Supreme Court justice, and we're due to get a 3rd by direct defeat. That's another issue. It's like, Joe Biden, who has been a demonstrated racist through the years, now he's going to be, I'm going to appoint the first black female, judge. Okay. Part of it is, okay, Joe, you said the quiet part out loud again.
You're meandering.
Yeah, I'm meandering, but it's my thing. I'm going to meander a bit. It's a Star Trek thread. I'll bring it around.
Yeah, if you're going to meander, talk about Whoopi Goldberg.
We'll get to that. But it's like, yeah, if you want to make a point of, appointing a black female justice Supreme Court, you don't announce that going in. You bring in all kinds of things, and if you happen to settle on a black female, great, fun and dandy. But now you announce from the get-go, you're only looking at a black female nominees. Well, you just said screw you to the rest of the entire country, okay? Even black males, Asian females, Hispanic, any other race but black females. That's it. And doesn't matter how qualified the final nominee is, it's always going to hang over her head. The only reason you got this job is because you're black and you're female. It wouldn't matter if they went back and tried to nominate that gal that Bush 43 tried to get in. I'm blanking on the name, but she was a black juror. And who led the filibuster against her? Joe Biden when he's in the Senate. So yeah, the man's a racist. He's still a racist. Okay. I remember bragging one time that Maryland was still a slave state, but stayed in the Union type thing. Like, who are you trying to, No. And he led the, one of the filibusters against, against busing, because he didn't want his kids growing up in a racial jungle at school. Those are his words. This is the moron you people elected. But again, as far as Whoopi Goldberg goes,
Really put her foot
I would have thought she'd be a little smarter about this whole thing. And like, one, she picked the name Goldberg. Okay, come on. And then says that about the Holocaust. And I sent her a tweet. I don't know how much of it got to her, because apparently there's certain things that you'll automatically get yeeted if you don't do something. But I sent something from my DNA breakdown from Ancestry.com. It was like 46% British, 20% Scottish, 20%. I said, what it doesn't say on here? White. The whole thing about, a white race. There is no one white race. One, that's a Nazi topic point, and then just ignore that. So, you've stepped into a mess that is far more complicated than you realize. It wasn't white people against white people in Holocaust. It was, it was these Germans against Jews. Yes, a lot of races look alike, hate each other's guts. Okay, have for thousands of years. And I'm probably shocked to her that at one point most of the slaves in America were Irish. Slavery didn't really become a racial thing until much later in the game. When it started off, it was like everywhere else. You did something screwed up, you're sold into slavery. And at the point, it was a lot cheaper to get Irish slaves than it was to get black slaves. Black slaves would cost a lot more for them. To get in the coldly, analytical mind of the mindset, black slaves were a lot more expensive. You had to go to Africa, get them up, buy them from black slave traders, by the way. And ship them all the way back. Whereas, you can just grab them off the streets of Dublin. And a lot cheaper, and the language barrier. You can talk to them right off the bat, Hey, Angus, go clean the stalls. It's a lot cheaper and easier to just get a bunch of Irish slaves. And if some of your, neighbors are a little persnickety about you having a slave, now they're just relatives. Blow it off that way. But for the most part, it wasn't a matter of, because you're a certain race, it's because you got dumb enough to be captured and sold into slavery. White, black, brown, whatever, And that's a conversation we do need to have as a country one of these days about the whole thing. And then that's part of why there's still a strike. We never really had the proper conversation about it. And too many people are in vested interest to not allow that conversation to happen. I'm not going to name names, but I think it doesn't take a whole lot of poking to figure out who is making their living off keeping the fight going. And I think it was around 90s to early 2000s. Ann Coulter points it out when OJ was acquitted in his first murder trial. That's the point where, we finally made the racial, a black man charged with murder got found not guilty by a mostly white jury. We're there, guys. Okay. But that couldn't be let settle. So, the various factors had to start the fight all over again. And unfortunately, because there is no actual real grievance, none of these morons have been forced to pick cotton or tobacco or other things. or watch their own relatives being sold, from one owner to another. They have no experience of anything resembling. All they have is, some crazed, teacher from grade school talking about, you're being oppressed. Am I? There's been fed this line of bull for years. They're brought up thinking they're oppressed. Like, you're living pretty high on the hog compared to, somebody in some middle class kid in, Zimbabwe right now. That sort of thing. Like a poor person in the United States is living in luxury compared to poor people elsewhere in the world. Hell, we're technically homeless, and we're ridiculously rich compared to somebody in, like, I don't know. Pick a poor country where the people are literally, drinking muddy water and eating bugs. Okay. But anyway, now we're really getting off in the weeds here. At this point, Star Trek's main salvation is through the animated shows. The live action ones, forget it. This stupid movie announcement, which everyone's trying to get going to go, yes, they're going to bring back the cast. And they expect to begin, in the very words of the day, they expect to begin negotiations with the original cast. They haven't even started talking to them yet. They plan on talking to them soon to begin there. And who knows if anybody wants to come back at this point. I don't think they could, what they want to do, they can't afford Chris Hemsworth. And Chris Pine has got enough stuff going on that has nothing to do with Star Trek. He's doing fine. And, I think they're also overestimating the popularity of the Kelvin timeline films, especially after all the crap has been going on since then. The one saving grace that JJ, had on those things is he did declare it a separate timeline, so that it can largely be judged on its own merits. And I can argue further that, nothing connects them with the original thing. Not even, before Nero comes in and, kills out Kirk's father. That ship doesn't fit the Kelvin doesn't fit anywhere close to resembling the thing. Those uniforms aren't right, and the ship is too dang big and everything else. And you got a Spock that doesn't have a clue about time travel? Because, think for a second. The Spock we know, the moment he found out that he was he'd been thrown back in time, and his history has been altered, he'd already be doing the time calculations in his head, updating them periodically until they had a time to enact them and go back in time and prevent any from this from happening. This Spock doesn't do that, because this Spock never went through Tomorrow's Yesterday, where he had to come up with a time warp calculation to get the Enterprise back in its proper timeline and fix all this. He just lets it happen. That's not Spock. That's Leonard Nimoy playing a character called Spock, but it ain't the same Spock. And also, you get, just the whole thing of Nero. It's like he has a chance to save his people. Does he? No. He wants to visit vengeance upon a planet that won't do what he's thinking of doing for another 100 years.
Nimoy actually approved Zachary Quino as Spock.
Well, yeah. Well, the main thing was I actually, when Nimoy came out here, and before anybody cast, and I asked him about that when he did the Q&A thing and his talk. And I understand it was in your contract that you have script approval of you have approval, a casting approval. Anybody who wants to play Spock, and it's something he wasn't really aware of. But yeah, in his contract, because he had approval of if anybody else was going to play Spock, he had to go through him first. And it was sometime after that, and they're going through the beat wherever, he goes out, he takes Zach Quino out to lunch. And as the waitress is taking the order, Leonard, and for your son, it's like, that's him. He looks like Adam Nimoy's little brother. Okay, so.
Yeah, some guy at a restaurant thought that Zachary Quino was Nimoy's son.
Yeah, well, they're there at the table,
Mm-hmm.
they recognize Nimoy. And I think it may be common knowledge that he's got a son, but Adam Nimoy is not that well known personally, in public. So, and whether or not they look enough alike that and for your son, okay, you got the part. But a few things kind of over the years kind of showed me that maybe Nimoy is not the greatest authority on what's best for Star Trek either, or what because going back to Star Trek 3 when they blew up the Enterprise, and of course the advertising people thought it'd be a great thing for the and for the trailer and the last voyage of Star Trek Enterprise, see wreckage coming. Nimoy was livid because they just gave away the big surprise in the movie. And he wanted to kill him. You blew it.
I probably would have.
Yeah, I would have I would have held him down while he throttled him. But what Nimoy didn't quite get was the intensity of the reaction of seeing the Enterprise blow up. He thought it's our ship. No, we had the same attitudes when Kirk, Sputnik, and I Mud. It's like, no, she's a lovely lady and we love her. The Enterprise was really a legitimate character in the cast. It wasn't just a ship, it was the Enterprise. So seeing her go up and a little bit of solace, like somebody in a letter to Starlog shortly afterwards, look, there probably weren't 2 bolts left of the original ship when she went down, okay? So that really wasn't the same ship, The rest of it's probably still sitting back at the Starfleet Museum, reassembled for, on a display armature. Okay, yeah. But it was still the thing, because the original plan was they were going to get the Excelsior. And that went over like a lead balloon amongst fan circles. So, okay. We'll do something to the Enterprise model and give them back on the Enterprise. But yeah, we're veering off here for somewhere. So like, I'll never be one of those that Star Trek is dead. Because when it's any fictional work with an established thing, it can always be brought back by writers who know what the hell they're doing. At the moment, the writers don't know what the hell they're doing, except on the animated side. So Star Trek is still on life support on that side of the franchise. On the live action thing, no. These are idiots. They don't know what they're doing. They don't care they don't know what they're doing. They've got their own little agenda, and they're going to run it through and come hell or high water. Paramount is going to keep this thing going along until they've, that's another thing we need to analyze a bit. Why is this show still running? By all rights, they should have canceled it after the first 13 episodes. Unfortunately, we got to get into how studio shows like this work these days. It's no longer a matter of ratings, because now we got all these other things: home video, streaming, where the numbers aren't known. They can't, but again, when they ran Discovery on CBS itself, I've seen plenty of shows get canceled after one episode with better ratings than what Discovery got. What is keeping that thing alive is, one, the two little words in the name, Star Trek. Somebody feels still has enough marketing oomph in it that they can sell this to somebody and make back some of their money. But also, they have to justify the cost somehow of this whole thing. Now, if they get a show to run, technically 5 seasons, although a season nowadays is 10 episodes. But if they can get 5 seasons worth of it, then they think, okay, they justify the the gargantuan expense. I mean, I'm assuming they're cutting the budget back to the bone for later seasons, because it's all the upfront costs, building the costumes, the sets, the models, and getting the effect shops up and running. And then you start cutting back because you got the sets, you got the costumes, you got all the stock footage. You don't need to spend the money all over again. And that's how you justify these things. Eventually, okay, you've done. Okay, we've evened out things enough. You're done. And they figure they can sell this on, sell the home video things. And there may be a lot of that going on with Picard too, because they gotta gotta justify these sets they paid for. And gonna be the same thing with Strange New Worlds. They're gonna get a few seasons out of it just because they spent so goddamn much on the sets and the cast. Doesn't matter. Nothing fits. Why is Uhura even on that ship? Besides, the girl they got really doesn't look much like Nichelle Nichols. Christine Chapel really doesn't belong on that ship either. Dr. Mbenga, I think if I need to rewatch A Private Little War, but they kind of implied that Dr. Mbenga had just come on board. Not that he'd been on there for 15 years. Okay? So, something, they're just pulling names out. And, of course, the whole thing of, this descendant of Khan amongst the crew and serving alongside Spock. You think Spock would have said something when they do find Khan later on. Oh, we had a crew member named Noonien Sung. Oh, did you now? Where is she now? And that would have played into it, but they're just pulling member berries out and seeing what sticks on the wall at this point. And I think it'd have to be a case of where have to pretty much prove nobody's watching it and it's actually drawing active dislike and working against them before they actually pull the plug on one of these shows prematurely. And my understanding is the way they structured this current thing, seasons 4 and 5 are pretty much shot together anyway, so they've got all season 5 stuff in the can as it is. It's all post-production work to do at this point. But even then, with 10 episodes apiece, 5 seasons of Star Trek Discovery is maybe the equivalent of the first 2 seasons of the original series, if that. No, not even that much, because the first season was 29 episodes, second one I think was like 20. So they'd be late second season. Probably about around the time that Gene Kuhn left, I think maybe. I have to look up, but find out which episode was episode 50. Because contrary to Saturday Night Live, no, fans of the day never referred to him as episode number whatever. And that's one thing I will not forgive them for, because I said that's in the vernacular. What? What? The episode. Don't give me numbers. Give me a title, okay? Because again, back in the day, a lot of stations didn't run them in order. In any order, they just ran. I like that one. Throw that in. And again, it was part of the thing. They could do that because it was episodic. But also, it's like back when they did do an order, generally it was production order. They didn't go by air date order. I'd still hate air date order because that was totally arbitrary. That was based on what was available at the time. So I think if I were to, if I had a say in, next DVD, or Blu-ray release, what order? Production order, production number order. That's that's the way I saw it. I didn't see it in air date. I was only 2.5 on a show in premiere anyway. But when I saw them, the first episode, regular episode I saw was Where No Man Has Gone Before. Followed by the Corbomite maneuver, and that's I didn't start with Man Trap. But now we're really getting off here. So, meandering along for long. Okay, we're at 40 minutes here.
Yeah.
Let's just say, yeah. She's trapped in the bathroom off camera. But all right, so Star Trek's not dead; it's resting. Okay, it's pining for the fjords. Okay. And pay no attention to these idiots strutting on stage. That's not Star Trek, okay?
In a medically induced coma.
What we got are some pretenders, on this. Yes, we're Star Trek. We're doing pretending. No, you're doing crap, okay? You're just waiting for someone to come along. The anime. You want to watch proper Star Trek now? New proper Star Trek. You're kind of stuck with Lower Decks and Prodigy. Sorry, guys. If you don't like the animation style, I can't do anything for you, okay?
Only two
And
reasons I even stick with Discovery.
I mean, granted, Lower Decks is a workplace comedy set on a starship. Oh well, there's still a place for that. I mean, I think Star Trek is not, this is one thing that drives me nuts when Jay goes, a big sprawling saga. No, it's a setting. It's a format. You can have big sprawling sagas, but you can also have little quiet episodes like comedy stuff like Trouble with Tribbles. You got, murder mysteries like, Wolf in the Fold, and you can have workplace comedy stuff like, Lower Decks. You can do anything within that format, as long as you stay within the format. And I think Lower Decks has done that very well. They're hewing closer to the line than the others in the live action shows, for damn sure. Every time they do a throwback to that era, it's an original series type thing. It's Gary Mitchell in his proper uniform. It's the freighters, from the animated series when they're fighting the ship over an old busted up freighter. All the member berries, not a one of them throw back to Discovery. You don't see any flashbacks of ships of that design. But that's part of the thing when they are doing member berries all over the place. They're properly used. They're in the right time. Nothing contradicts anything. You get a little cringe moment where Ransom refers to the TOS era. TOS, yeah, those old scientists. That's pushing it, okay. But what's on the tablet? Kirk and Spock from the animated series, lifted straight off. And that's also why I think if they ever do a thing where the Cerritos goes back in time to that era, the funniest thing would be to match the animation style and the ship movements to the animated series. But proper Star Trek right now is strictly in the realm of animation, because live action, they've lost the plot. They never had it in the first place. And for those who think, if only Brian Fuller stuck around. No, Brian Fuller is no friend to canon either. Okay? And I heard that one from someone who, I'm not going to name names, but he would know what he's talking about, because he's been on the inside. So had a very nice, long, very friendly conversation. I want to pick his brain some more sometime. But as an example, when they were filming In a Mirror Darkly, and they're working out what the insignia design for the Defiant was going to be, Brian Fuller was the one who said it needs to be the arrowhead. That was supposed to be all for, and there was no, Brian, no. Don't go to them. All the ships have their own insignia. It's a preponderance of evidence. I don't care what Bob Justman's snarky little memo said, and I'm not sure how serious he was on that, because he signed a Grand Inquisitor. Upon pain of death, it's like. So I don't know how serious he was about that himself, because also he would have had to have approved the outlay for Bill Theiss to make those Exeter insignia. Okay, they had to make like a few of them. You had one for Captain Tracy, one for the chief medical officer, the uniform, and also for at least one engineering insignia when they were showing that uniform sprawled out with it. So they had to make a few of those Exeter patches. And then also when on Commodore Decker's patch, it's like clearly, obviously, there were different insignia for different ships, and where you're seeing someone with the arrowhead, that's a production error. Okay, they didn't think they were a little back and forth on that thing, but for the most part, the preponderance of evidence is every ship had its own insignia, which makes a hell of a lot more sense. So that you can look at it and think, okay, yeah, hey, you from the Exeter, or you from from whatever. You look at the insignia, you can tell what ship they're on. That happens today. Every unit has their units have their own insignia, their own patches. So okay, and my wife wants to get out of the bathroom. So enough of the rant for a while. We will talk at you later, and the links down below to help us pay for things here.